anyway, is Behaviorism, Constructivism, and Socratic Pedagogy by Peter Boghossian in Educational Philosophy and Theory. And here we go. The great triumph of Western intellectual history from the Enlightenment until the beginning of the 20th century rested on its ability to organize the knowledge of the world in a rational way, independent of the learner, determined by some structure of the subject. Disciplines were developed, taxonomic schemes established, and all these categories were viewed as components of a vast mechanical machine in which the parts could be explained in terms of their relationship to each other, and each part contributed to making the whole function smoothly. Nowhere in this description does the learner appear. The task of the teacher was to make clear to the learner the working of this machine, and any accommodation to the learner was only to account for different appropriate entry points for different learners. This is an interesting way to start a paper, because if you've read a little bit of fantasy, I'm sure a lot of people in the community have. They have like these grand metaphysics, and like you're just a piece in the metaphysics. And the problem with fantasy, of course, there's a lot of magic happening, religious things, blah blah blah, a lot of stuff. And so the idea that you have like this grand metaphysics that you're just like a part of, like you're a cog in this like wonderful scheme of a fantasy land. It's like maybe that's not the best way to think of actually the rational world. You're in a great chain of being. Yes, exactly. Like, in a galaxy far away. Yeah, how's that? Introduction. Behaviorism dominated the educational landscape 20 years ago, while the foremost learning theory today is Constructivism. Set against the backdrop of these more recent theories is Socratic Pedagogy, which finds its origin in the Platonic dialogues. While learning theories have come and gone, the Socratic method has persisted. But what exactly is a relationship between these two learning theories and Socratic pedagogy? Specifically, can a Socratic teacher be either a constructivist or a behaviorist? These questions are important because the two dominant learning theories are often presented as either-or propositions, false dichotomies that educators must choose between. This does not have to be the case. The Socratic method provides a middle ground between the two and has many strengths of both constructivism and behaviorism. When understood in a philosophical framework and practiced in the classroom, this ancient pedagogical alternative can be a potent learning tool. Unreal Brian, behaviorism, that wasn't really a thing in educational theory since the 60s, just saying. Yeah, did he really make it, well, when was this written? This is 2006, and so 20 years ago in 2006 would have been 1986. So maybe it hung on for a little bit after the 60s. Maybe he's off by a little bit of time, and so that's a fair criticism if he's, making things like how they really weren't, saying they just were that way. But, okay, I don't know the history here. Either way, as long as behaviorism and constructivism were dominant theories in, say, the last 100 years, it's not completely unfair. Makes you skeptical that he doesn't know what is going on in the world of education. Fair. Again, fair. The question is, if these are major theories that were in the last 100 years, maybe this 20-year thing that he said right here should have said last 50 years. And, yeah, it makes him look bad, but it may not be all that detrimental. I don't know. Okay, in the first section of this paper, I'll briefly define and explain each learning theory as it relates to the Socratic project. In the second section, I address the question of whether or not a Socratic teacher can subscribe to a constructivist or behaviorist learning theory. The paper concludes by stating that while Socratic pedagogy shares some similarities with each learning theory, ultimately it is fundamentally incompatible with both. Unreal Brian says the journal is a big one in philosophy of education. A little surprised they didn't call that out. Yeah, but again, if you've been here long enough, you'll see lots of mistakes slip by. Lots. So yeah. Understanding the learning theories, constructivism and behaviorism, also see appendix. Constructivism. This is a quote. There is no knowledge independent of the meaning attributed to experience constructed by the learner or community of learners. Where behaviorism views knowledge as resulting from a finding process, constructivism views knowledge as the natural consequence of a constructive process. Where behaviorism views learning as an active process of acquiring knowledge, constructivism views learning as an active process of constructing knowledge. Finally, where behaviorism views instruction as the process of providing knowledge, constructivism views instruction as the process of supporting construction of knowledge. Okay. So, I mean, okay, whatever, if they say so. End quote. There are many different types of constructivism these big words are making me trip up. Among the most popular are cognitive, critical, radical, and social. However, they all share the same core, the idea that learners construct their own knowledge. Constructing knowledge means that students are active participants in a learning process by seeking to find meaning in their experiences. In a literal sense, learners construct or find meaning in their subjective experiences, and this result becomes knowledge. For the constructivist, each person's subjective experience is just as valid as anyone else's, and no one has an epistemically privileged point of view. Therefore, there are no objective criteria for what constitutes knowledge. What is knowledge to one individual may not be knowledge to someone else, because no two people necessarily have the same constructions. Having the same constructions would carry with it a host of ontological presuppositions about the world and reality, none of which constructivists accept. All right, this is very radical. I mean, most people aren't going to be hardcore relativistic about knowledge, because that's not what most people are going to be doing. And so the idea that like everything is just constructed and then there's like a local truth to everyone and there is no global truth to knowledge, there's just a local truth, that seems kind of radical in terms of just philosophy. Most people don't hold that everyone's truth is equally as valid. It's like, look, it's raining or it's not raining. It's not that you get to claim it's not raining when like you're getting wet. What about knowledge of American football? I mean, that's absolutely true. Like, of course, that is certain knowledge, American football. But like, this is weird. Like, I just find that like this is a very radical sort of relativism that everyone's knowledge is just as legitimate. Like, that's just weird because you can be wrong about stuff. Especially, I mean, it's going to be relative in such cases, but like the rules of football in American football are not relative. You either know what the rules are or you don't. Like, how does like your construction of them matter? They're set out in stone, well, not in stone, but like they're written out in books. So that's a little weird. Unreal Brian says there were a fair number of people in schools of education in my time who subscribed to that and were proud to call themselves constructivists. It's fair. Now, it depends on what I actually suspect is going on here is that there is a subset of knowledge where the way you go about learning the things in the world is constructed, and so you have your own unique perspective on things, and so things can like sort of be a little shifty there. Now, I suspect that's kind of how things broke down, that like everyone's viewpoint is legit, but you know, we're gonna at least glom onto some big truths. Yeah. Okay, well, it's good to get the background on Real Brian. I appreciate that. But like, it just seems most people aren't radical relativists where there's a truth relative to every knower. Yeah. But I mean, it does happen, of course. As a learning theory, constructivism emerged from a broader movement in Western intellectual thought, the subjective turn, and postmodernism. Yeah, so everything's subjective. That's sort of the point here. That's fair. I don't know if it was postmodernism, though, but it was definitely being subjective. The subjective turn was a move away from objectivity and epistemology, what one can know independent of an examiner, and metaphysics, what there is independent of the knower, and towards individual experiences. Yeah, every knower is a knower. Yeah, I was wondering if how that was going to go. Like, see, this is fair. Like, if you turn away from like objective reality, yeah, then you can say like everything has legitimacy in your experience, but again, that doesn't mean you can deny like that it's raining. That doesn't make sense. Before the subjective turn, objectivity had a primacy attached to it. Again, objectivity, though, like you're talking like objectivity of science, big things. They're not talking like the everyday stuff. This is where I get annoyed about these things. Okay, before the subjective turn, objectivity had a primacy attached to it, both conceptually and practically. In other words, objectivity was upheld as the goal of inquiry. As will be mentioned below, this manifested itself in the dominant learning theory of the time, behaviorism. Yeah, because if there's a world out there that you have to, learn about, then you have to modify your behavior to figure that out. You're not, making a truth for yourself. There were a lot of education people that got constructivism out of Dewey, though that makes Dewey's scholars' teeth itch. Interesting. Yeah, I don't know how, I could see where they kind of could bastardize pragmatism to say, look, everyone has their sort of pragmatic viewpoint, but that's not going to work because pragmatism, you have to do stuff that has a result. So it's you kind of would need the pragmatic reasons to hold up, and just because you like it is not going to last over time. Well, not that you like it, that someone likes it. Okay, postmodernism is somewhat harder to define. Yeah, see, this is also weird. I feel like this is a little Boghossian, just making shit up. How do you actually think postmodernism is forcing educators' theories? I'm a little surprised, but whatever. Postmodernism is somewhat harder to define because it is an intentionally broad term, and it is this open-ended quality that shows its wide range of meaning. Postmodernism basically is the idea that there are multiple perspectives, interpretations, and truths, and that each perspective has its own validity. See, that's fair, but I don't know if that only is postmodernism. No one perspective is more valid than any other perspective. For example, and this is closely related to the idea of subjectivity discussed in the paragraph above, something can be true for me but not true for you. So he gives a reference here. I'd have to find who this Sawyer 82 is. The true four claims not only cover trivial and mundane matters of personal taste, like which type of pie is better, apple or cherry, but extend to all propositions, even empirical ones. Yeah, that is a claim that a postmodernist might make, but that it gets a bit harder to see exactly how you get educational theory out of that. Jameson's definition: postmodern is the cultural logic of late capitalism. Yeah, that's kind of, it's what can you monetize? And it's well, there you go. Nothing's true. It's just what do you have money for? One can easily see how constructivism emerged from these two movements. Constructivism replaced the teacher as the center of knowledge, objective, with the learner, subjective. Independent of the teacher, each learner's subjective experience now have a special and unique meaning. It is both the student's learning experience and her perceptions of those experiences that have educational value. Unlike behaviorists, constructivists argue that there are multiple realities constructed by individuals. The human mind does not copy reality from outside directly, rather it constructs reality. In other words, there is no shared reality. This is the defining difference between constructivist and behaviorist learning theories. Okay, fair enough. Maybe some of this stuff was a little overblown, but you get the point. It's where is the learning happening? Are you figuring out what the world is, or are you trying to, construct an understanding of how reality is, and then that construction is what we call knowledge. Behaviorism. I am sometimes asked, do you think of yourself as you think of the organisms you study? The answer is yes. So far as I know, my behavior at any given moment has been nothing more than the product of my genetic endowment, my personal history, and the current setting. Skinner, 1983. Skinner is the behaviorist. So, behaviorism is diametrically opposed to constructivism. Unlike constructivists, behaviorists believe that knowledge does not depend on introspection. See, again, this is weird. Introspection is not what they claimed above. It's that everyone's perspective has value, not how you think of yourself. Introspection is what you think you do. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's introspective. But that's, again, a little slippery right there. Okay, and they completely reject discussion about internal mental states. Yeah, so behaviorism just looks at the behaviors, no internal mental states. But again, constructivists didn't ask us about internal mental states. They just said your opinion is what matters. So I'm not 100% with this yet. Okay, rather, behaviorism focuses on the external observation of lawful relations between and among outwardly observable stimuli and the responses that follow. What constitutes valid knowledge is publicly observable, and as such, behaviorists believe that the concept of mental states can be discarded. This is fair. It's if you want to know, this is the old behaviorism, you don't trust what people say, you look what people do, and then you find out. Okay, to understand behaviorism, it is important to understand the intellectual movement that contributed to its development. Behaviorism is a psychology that was strongly influenced by positivism, a philosophical movement. Positivism only recognized natural phenomena or properties of knowable things along with their lawful relations of coexistence and succession. Yeah, this was, logical positives. They wanted to build science up from the ground, and so you had to have a very empirically based viewpoint. The positivist believes that the relationships are discovered only by observation and experiment. Both ways of looking at the world have been termed objectivist because of the belief that there is a God's eye view or privileged external viewpoint that one can obtain. One of the consequences of this is the recognition only of publicly observable phenomena, and subjective ways of knowing and understanding become discredited. Epistemologically, behaviorism and positivism are grounded in objectivism, which assumes that there is a single reality external to individuals. Based on this objectivist worldview, behaviorists argue that learners acquire knowledge from outside resources. That was a quote. So yeah, it's what's going on. You can see there's an empirical world that can be studied, and that's just whatever you're studying is that single empirical world. And that's fair. That's a lot of people hold that sort of thing. In the traditional behaviorist model, learners undergo some form of conditioning. Ultimately, the goal of conditioning is to produce a behavioral result. In an academic venue, changing behavior is more difficult to measure than in other contexts like a karate class, where there are observable physical behaviors that result from physical stimuli. For example, in the hypothetical karate class, if students do not form straight lines, they are punched in the shoulder, stimuli. After a few people get out of line, they get punched, and the line becomes noticeably straighter. Behavioral response. Yeah, so you're lining up. I didn't know what they would mean making a line, but standing next to each other in a line. However, in an academic context, behaviorists substitute verbal behaviors, for example, responding appropriately to a question, for a physical behavior. The behaviorist would interpret, for example, a student's correct answer to a question as a sign of successful conditioning, and then continue to reinforce correct responses behaviorally by assigning good grades. Often the form of conditioning used to achieve desirable verbal behavior is a lecture-based pedagogy. Behaviorism thus views the student as an unreflective responder. In a behaviorist paradigm, the student is engaged in the educational process only in that she displays the appropriate verbal behavior, for example, checking the correct box on a multiple choice test. There is no subjective element to learning, either in determining what to study or in how information is interpreted, used, or understood. Yeah, this is the old rote memorization theory, is kind of well, did you get the right answer? Yeah, well, you can memorize stuff and then do it, so, yeah. Okay, so we had the constructivists where everything matters how you understand the stuff, and then we've got the behaviorists is only about the output of what you have learned. And so it's how you did it versus what you can output. Socratic pedagogy, in this quote again. I am simply your fellow explorer in the search for truth, and if somebody who contradicts me is obviously right, I shall be the first to give way. So that's Socrates in the Gorgias. The presupposition of the Socratic method is that there is a truth of the matter, and that truth can be known through discourse, or more specifically through the Hellenetic process. I thought it was Elenchic, but all right, Hellenetic process. Maybe I don't know my linguistics. Maybe that's how you make the word out of it. Yeah, Elenchus. So the Hellenetic process. The Elenchus is a systematized question and answer process that is directed by the teacher and depends on the student involvement. Its purpose is to help those engaged in a dialogue discover true propositions through a sustained inquiry. I'm not sure, Boghossian quotes himself here, which is always a suspect thing. There is a lot of discussion about what's going on in Socrates and Plato. Its purpose is to help those engaged in a dialogue discover true propositions through a sustained inquiry. Is that really what's going on in Plato? I'm not so sure that is actually what's going on in Plato. A lot of times I feel like the Socrates and Plato is an asshole. A lot of stuff, Plato's an asshole. And he's screwing with people. He's you don't actually know what you're talking about. So do you discover true propositions, or are you poking holes in what people thought were true? Because Socrates is a gadfly. And so the idea that that is what Socrates was up to, is actually discovering true propositions. The person who said that the thing they know is that they don't know anything. Are you really discovering true propositions then? Well, that's not what he claimed. So, little weird. So we got Weird Champ on Plato here. In the Platonic dialogues, the reason Socrates engaged in discourse was to find the truth. What's up, Eris the Cat Goss? How you been? I seen you. You've had some streams lately. What's going on with the Twizzard and stuff? But welcome in. It's been a bit. O'Neill Bryan says, he has such a narrow view of the possibilities. He talks about his version of the Socratic method in a structuralist way, everything being the unified discourse, which is in itself a bit postmodern. Yeah, so he's got particular views about this stuff. And it's interesting. So, yeah, if anyone just joining us, we're talking about some educational philosophy. And so is Boghossian, who kind of made a little bit of a name for himself. But behaviorism, constructivism, and Socratic pedagogy. He's trying to lay out a way that Socratic pedagogy is actually going to provide a different path in educational theory. But I don't mind him having his own sort of thing going on. But it's just the fact that he's stating it like it's, this is what Socrates was doing. Yeah, we've had 2,500 years of arguing over what Socrates was doing. I don't think that your one interpretation is the end all be all of it, Peter. But okay. Yeah, so I hope you're doing well, Aris. Hope the, was it Dungeon Discordio? I forget what it's called. It's going well. So, yeah, don't ask me to remember stuff when streaming. Anyway, in the Platonic dialogues, the reason Socrates engaged in discourse was to find the truth. Really? Maybe, but a lot of times that doesn't seem like what he ends up doing. For example, in the Meno, Socrates approaches a slave boy because he wanted to teach him or elicit from him a true proposition about geometry. Before he even enters into the discourse, he knows that the truth exists independently of his belief. Well, this is Plato, yeah. So Plato already had the idea on this. He does not construct a geometrical truth, rather truth exists in the world, and he expresses and discovers that through language. Yeah, I mean, this is Plato, like world of the forms sort of thing. Socrates also knows that through asking a series of directed questions, he can, along with his interlocutor, arrive at the truth. That is, he not only knows that there is a truth, but he knows that it can be known through a dialectical process. Unreal says, Dewey, on the other hand, believed in the existence of an external world, and that learning came from generally social interaction with and engagement with that world. Yeah, so this is a different sort of thing. So Boghossian is saying that you get this through the discussion of the ideas and like a question-answer thing, and you mean like Dewey is doing something different. There is a world for the pragmatist, but you have to engage with the world, see what works out. Eris says, you got it, nice memory. When you say Socratic pedagogy, do you mean teaching people by asking questions? I think that we haven't got there yet, but I think that's where he's going. He's going to argue something along the lines that you have to lead people into answering questions from their own position to the truth. So that's what I think is going to happen here. But we haven't gotten there yet. So he's just outlining the beginnings of what he wants to say. So yeah. Okay, ultimately the main purpose of the Socratic method is to help the students and the teacher find the truth. Yeah, so he thinks that through questions and answers, you will somehow arrive at the truth. Through the elenchus, the Socratic presuppositionless asking questions. It shows that once you learn how to ask the right questions, you can find the truth. Contemporary Socratic practice is often used less as a way to find the truth and more as a method for teaching critical thinking. Fair, maybe. Nevertheless, even in a contemporary context, the Socratic method is driven by an assumption that knowledge exists independently of the inquirer. That is the basis upon which propositions can be determined to be true or false. Their truth value is necessarily independent of the inquirers. Tindarius, this is weird streamception, so I take Tindarius might be Tindarios from the other place. But welcome in Tindarius in YouTube chat. Yeah, I'm co-streaming or dual streaming to YouTube at the moment. Yeah, streamception. I know it's a little bit it's weird, ain't it? So yeah, so again, this is a lot of some. You are Tindarios, I figured, but okay. How is the dual streaming going? It's going. I've got I'm using a restream service, so I stream out to a server and then it splits the stream. They don't charge me for doing this. They only charge for storing the stream. So afterwards. So I delete my streams off their server afterwards, and so it's only going to cost me a few cents to do this. It's been pretty good. I dropped 139 frames at the very beginning of stream and none since, it looks like. So it's been pretty stable. It looks pretty good as far as I can tell in the VODs. So yeah, so it's going. If you have any questions about like, let me actually, this is the service I'm using, by the way. So yeah. You put in your credit card, but like it's not, as far as I know, like you're not going to get charged a whole lot. So that's how I'm doing it, and it's been good enough. It's working. I think the person running it, Commander Root, also is like someone on Twitch, like in one of my communities that I'm in, and so they were like, we're just going to use this guy's stuff, so it's cool. Since Semiotic says, knowledge cannot exist without anyone doing the knowing. Facts can exist, knowledge could be in someone else's mind, but I think it's a stretch to say that knowledge exists out there. Well, see, this is one of these big conceits of this paper. This is the Socratic methodology. No, this is Socrates according to Plato. Plato, of course, had the world of forms. That's what was going on a lot of times, is Plato's dialogues are telling you about the world of the forms. That was his metaphysics. And so it's not really a Socratic philosophy here, because it's not the historical Socrates. This is the Platonic Socrates. And so, again, this is a little bit loose with the technicals of the philosophy. Yeah. You're Tindera's brother, by the way. Yeah, I figure. Yeah, German humor. Yeah, that was hilarious, my friend. So, yeah. You would argue that knowledge in one mind isn't knowledge. Knowledge is social. Do you think Plato was fucking with us? No, I think Plato was a little nuts. I don't think Plato was fucking with us. I think Plato was wrong. And Plato, well, mostly wrong. Had some very clever ideas. But, no, I think Plato really believed what he was saying. But, it was just like, it's just a little crazy. You mean like intentionally misrepresenting Socrates? No, I think this is what Plato actually believed. I think Plato was distinct from Socrates, and then I think this may have just been how he interpreted the world. No, like I really just think, I don't see someone putting all this, like philosophy is hard. It wasn't like it was easy for anyone to do this. I doubt that there's only a few people out there that have ever like done philosophy just like from a young age. A lot of times they're on the technical side of things, like, Kripke or something. It's just very hard to do this. And so the idea that he spent all this time misinterpreting Socrates is unlikely. He had to put all this time and effort in. He meant it. You have a theory that the Republic was satire. I haven't convinced anyone else of this. Yeah, it's going to be hard. A lot of times that does happen. People write books just to like show that the idea is untenable. But like, again, that's like one of these, like, just because you think, or anyone, even the author, thought it was satire, doesn't mean that's how the rest of us are going to interpret it. I like the unfortunately unlikely idea that there was no Socrates. Yeah, that's possible too. That's not true, but I love the idea of it. It's any of these historical figures, like, we have historical evidence of there being a Socrates from multiple, like, sources. But, I mean, does that have to hold up? Not really. I mean, it doesn't really matter at this point. What we think of Socrates is kind of what's important now. That there actually was a Socrates at this point, like, who knows? Who cares? We're probably not gonna learn anything more about the man unless, some grand trove of like documents from back then pops up somehow. But it's like, yeah. So we got Tinderius and Tinderios, and one's on YouTube and one's on Twitch. You were super disappointed to find out that there's no way he didn't exist? Well, I mean, okay, fine. Unreal says, but the details of Socrates' personality and thought could be Plato's construction, graphed onto someone who was real. Yeah, I mean, if you want to make stuff up, and I don't see how it really matters for philosophy. It matters for literature and philosophy in some sense. Look at the rhetorical method. Well, that's what matters, like what we've gotten through history from all of this. But I mean, that someone actually existed way back when is less important than now than what we have culturally got from like the history of since then. What's it called? Like, there's people that claim that Shakespeare didn't exist, or it was like a group of people. I mean, yes, that would be historically interesting to find out the truth, but, the truth is probably the simplest explanation, that it was just a guy who was very good at writing. I mean, people were saying that it was like other authors, but like these other authors wrote all this other stuff. It's like, how did they have enough time to write all the plays and all the sonnets and then everything else they did? It's like, you could, but it's just like, it would be historically novel. It would be a novelty, but like, so what? Not a big deal. The point is, you can invent a Socrates of your own anytime. It's a process now. Okay. So yeah, you're just a constructivist about Socrates. I got you. Yeah, so this is the weird thing. Eris says, if you read this stuff in the ancient Greek, do you think you would get anything different out of it? Do the people doing the translations have to guess on anything? It's hard, actually. That's a tough question to answer. There are people who read like ancient Greek. Like there are people that have like, they read all this old stuff. That doesn't mean we have enough information. And, people are idiosyncratic. They use words at different times in different ways. And so the people who are really into like hardcore scholars, they can read it, and they would get anything. Would they get anything out of it? They'd have to be good philosophers. At this point, I think we've gotten sort of like the basic picture of what's going on, but like reading it in the ancient Greek, yes, you're going to get more out of it. You're going to get more context on a lot of things, but a lot of the stuff we've hashed out over the last like 200 years, since there's been sort of standard translations. But again, we've done this on Aristotle's stream. He will go in and look at a certain word and find out that it's being kind of misused in certain interpretations. And so you can still go back and look at stuff and then be like, wait, they're not really using this word in a typical way in certain translations, and it does affect the meaning. So that does happen a lot. Now, do we have to guess on anything? Yeah, we still have to guess. And there's things from like very ancient Greek that we've had a lot of trouble with. I mean, there's a famous thing called the wine dark sea. Why did the Greeks call the sea the color of wine? We didn't know. We think nowadays, and this is a recent thing, that ancient cultures didn't develop more distinctions in dark colors because they just weren't as important as distinctions in light colors. So we'd have distinctions between like sky and like light blues and light greens, because that would be more of the stuff we would talk about. But dark colors we didn't. And so they were thinking that purple and dark blue were they just used the same word for stuff. But like the wine dark sea, like we weren't sure, was wine a different color back in ancient Greece? We don't have the grapes that they were using to make wine. So maybe their wine was bluer. Maybe the sea was actually a different color back in the day. Maybe the sea in that area had algae that made it more purple. We don't know. So things like that have been screwing with our heads, and we will never get a good answer to this. So you can look up wine dark sea, and like you'll get a whole lot of discussion in this area. Unreal says, I think various the translations vary quite a lot. So I think read it in the Greek if you have the skills would be revealing. Yeah, serious scholars of like classics, they all read the ancient Greek. Yeah. Sinister America says, no, I mean, the point is very instructive and important that Plato cannot have helped but have some perspective on Socrates. This is unavoidable among humans. Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, Platonic Socrates is not the man Socrates. I mean, of course not. Absolutely not. And so the idea like that he's reading into it and not just doing it like mistakenly, he's doing it on purpose because he wants to say something. He's definitely doing some of that. Unreal says Alan Bloom's footnotes in his translations on the Republic are actually really good in that regard. Interesting. Since Americ's the rhetoric is a device that itself becomes philosophically crucial. Yes, absolutely. How ideas are expressed and like the methods used, because they're dialogues as opposed to, a philosophical like text like this, which is, setting out the ideas. But when you have different people speaking in different voices, that in itself really can change and color how you understand what's going on. Yeah. So, but anyway, again, and you get that exactly here with Boghossian himself, because like he's saying, contemporary Socratic practices often use less as a way to find the truth and more as a method for teaching critical thinking. Really? Is it? But like this is how he's presenting it, and it's like he's coloring it with his own thing. Plato's engaging in Socratic method with Socrates misrepresenting with straw men. Yes, a bit. But again, what was he trying to do? Like, was he really trying to misrepresent Socrates, or was he trying to present some of his own ideas in a certain way? It's like, is that a bad thing to, present your ideas? No. Misrepresenting Socrates, maybe not the greatest thing. But like, was it bad? Maybe it was okay back in the day. You could do that. I don't know. Nevertheless, even in a contemporary context, the Socratic method is driven by an assumption that knowledge exists independently of the inquirer. Oh yeah, read that. We're very confused about this, but fine. Poll time, would you have voted to kill Socrates? Yeah, because he was an asshole. Systemic says, I don't approve that you make so much distinction between literature and philosophy. That's fair. I mean, that's a fair criticism of me. Because I definitely come from the technical side of things, which is not literature. So maybe that's my history, my biases. But yeah, this is all that's fair. But yeah, it's like, again, I'm not disagreeing with anything you said in any of this, what you were saying there either. Like, I think everything you said was right. I'm just saying, what does it, like, in the end, what does it, like, philosophically matter that Plato was reinterpreting Socrates? Yes, plenty of philosophical knowledge is communicated in literature, including fiction. Absolutely. And I put philosophy as closer to fiction than non-fiction. Yeah, so Tindarius wants to know what kind of literature, but yeah. Do we have any writings from Socrates? No, we have no writings from Socrates. None. Nothing. He wrote nothing down. We only have other reports from the time, and then, of course, Plato making stuff up as he was going. As far as I know, we have a lot of people have no actual reports. We sure he was real? Yeah, we have reports, like we have, like, the death of Socrates we have reported in, like, the Athenian or whatever like records of the time. So we have, like, records of him dying, being, like, put to death. So it's like we know that someone named Socrates was killed. Now, was that Socrates the exact same Socrates of the philosophy of Plato? Then maybe we've got some other questions going on. But, like, it's pretty, we have other independent reports of someone, like a philosopher named Socrates, existing. Yeah, Tindarius, of course, if you're doing it in a story method, you're doing other things, like in a literature way, you're doing it other things at the same time. You're telling a story as well as doing some philosophy, but doing two things at once isn't necessarily bad either. I mean, if only doing the philosophy, then don't write literature, but if you want to do, more than one thing, that's not necessarily bad either. So, but if you just want to do philosophy, then you can just do philosophy. If you just want to do stories, you can just do stories, and you can mix it up a little. It's kind of fun. For example, Thus Spake Zarathustra is telling multiple stories at once, the most important of which is that it calls for your attention to the literature itself being in control of human thought. We need to reverse the power. That's the novel. And that's ironic. It makes me mentally hard, throbbingly. Well, there we go. So now we know how to give cinesemiotics a headache. Okay. So, yeah, so that is the basis upon which propositions can be determined to be true or false. Their truth value is necessarily independent of the inquirers. If it were not, then propositions would just be true for some people and not true for others. Yeah, so we're in the Platonic thing, where the world of forms. What are we talking about? The form of things. They exist independently of us. That's what this is. So, or framing this in constructivist language, knowledge would just be constructed. Yeah. Self-reference explained without a single reference to self-reference. Yes. I mean, you can do end arounds on self-reference, of course. So, although people in the technical areas sometimes suspect that you are actually doing self-reference, just it's in a non-obvious way, but you can try. Okay, so even in contemporary Socratic practice, the realist presupposition is that true propositions yield assent because they correspond to a shared knowable world. And if seeking the truth is not the primary objective of some Socratic practitioners, then the elenchus acts as a dialectical safeguard to adjudicate competing claims. False propositions can still be rejected and the truth can still emerge. Yeah, so you can use this even if you don't have a theory of truth, because you're going to knock out worse propositions. So you can do this even without the truth, but you can knock out things that are clearly false. Zarathustra. Yes, exactly. The Socratic method takes its participants towards a destination, the truth. So while Socratic practice can, and often is, illegitimately used as a debate tool, even in these contexts, fundamental assumptions about universal assent to true propositions are operative. Okay, this is him just like spouting his Platonic metaphysics here. I don't know if it actually holds in actual Socrates, but he's a Platonist. That's fine. He's saying, and anyone who says wrong is wrong, and that's not what's happening in Platonic Socrates, like, fine, that's nice, but there's nothing deep about that. And the fact that the elenchus in the Socratic method is being used without the sort of background metaphysics, that's not illegitimate. It isn't. You can use different parts of philosophy to do different things. He's just, beating the drum here, like, you're not using all of the philosophy the way I think you should. Like, I don't give a shit, Peter Boghossian. Like, I don't care. That's how things happen. Like, they take the good part that they like and then they use it. Like, if you don't like that bit, well, then that doesn't make them wrong. It just means that they're doing something different from you. Systemic says the beautiful point here is that yes, it's self-referential and it knows or hopes that you know that, but it pointed out by its absence the importance of realizing they hacked the novel, that communicated with us by betraying and hacking the words. There's a lot of math. Yes, I mean, yeah, you've got concepts and self-referential concepts, and what you're doing in some sense self-references itself. You can do it if you want to. Okay. Can a Socratic teacher be a behaviorist? Let's see. Kind of. This is getting into linguistic behaviorism. You can do that. Okay, quote. When a teacher complains that students are off task, a favorite bit of educational jargon, the behaviorist will leap to the rescue with a program to get them back on again. The more reasonable response to this complaint is to ask, what's the task? Not surprisingly, this way of framing the problem meets with considerable resistance on the part of many educators. More than once I have been huffily informed that life isn't always interesting and kids had better learn to deal with this fact. Thus is the desire to control children or the unwillingness to create a worthwhile curriculum rationalized as being in the best interests of the student. Yeah, I mean, hey, capitalism. Learn to do bad work on your own time. For no money. Okay. The short answer to this question is no, a Socratic teacher cannot be a behaviorist. There are, however, some similarities between behaviorist learning and theory and Socratic pedagogy. You're not getting any arousal from that clever self-reference thing. Degustavus, I guess. Yeah, dude. Well, streaming is hard. Like, I have only so much blood flow at the moment, and most of it is going to being running stream and talking. So I have less blood flow going to other areas. Not so easy to pull off. I did like it though. I appreciate the comment, but getting a rise out of me on at this point is going to be kind of hard. Hey, juggling biohazards. I think novels are overrated by far. Well, you do read a lot of them, so we do read a lot of books. Again, people do things for different reasons. Now, if you need distraction, it's like maybe you want something that is like, a fanciful story. You don't want like to learn anything. It happens. And no, I know you meant fiction on that. So it's like, yeah. We've had the discussion. Like, people say like they have different like rules for their stream on Twitch. Like, no backseating. Some people have very strict like, we only have certain kind of discussions here. And like, a lot of people in like this community, sometimes they have a problem with that. I understand. Like, you want to discuss things, and our like, discussions can be on lots of topics. This is not like my stream doesn't have any like safe space tags on it. I'm not like a safe space thing. I actually have a hostile. This is a hostile space. I will shoot your ass down if I don't like what I hear. But You could have like historical novels, like mostly, well, maybe cinesemiotics, yeah. So, fair. But like, people are allowed to have like what, like, if you're allowed to do what you want on your stream. Like, you can set the rules. It's like playing a game. You're playing if you play chess, you have to follow those rules. Otherwise, you're not playing chess. There are set rules to playing chess. There are set rules to American football. You don't abide by those rules, you are not playing chess or American football or whatever game you're playing. And that's the thing. You're allowed to set up your stream and go do the things you want to do for whatever reason. They may not be good reasons. Like, football may not be a good sport. I'm not saying it is or isn't. I'm just saying, if you don't want to play football, don't go play American football. If you want to play chess, go play chess. But like, you're allowed to play the games you want to play. And so you can set things up the way you want. So if you don't like novels, fine. But like, you have to understand, people have set up their lives where they need that sort of distraction, or that's how they access the world. That's how they like thoughts to come to them. It's fair. You may think they're overrated for you, but for other people, that's how they do. That's how they do stuff. And I'm not like, and I don't mean to be beating up on Tyndareus. Not at all. I'm just saying you have to realize other people do things differently than you, and it works for them. Like, how does it work for you? How does it work for someone else? Okay, sorry to go on a rant, but like, this sort of thing, as someone who does an unusual stream, like this sort of like it's important to me. Like, you know? Okay. So in a behaviorist paradigm, learners are told about the world and are expected to replicate its contents. This is antithetical to Socratic practice. Even though Socrates, the Socratic teacher, shares the same epistemological presupposition as the behaviorist, that is, that the world exists and can be known, the very design of the method prevents the teacher from telling the student how the world is, from expecting the student to respond or behave in a certain way, or from demanding that she exhibit proscribed verbal behavior. I don't know if I buy this at all. Socrates was asking leading questions. When you're asking leading questions, that's because you're trying to get to the answer you want. Now, someone could always be fighting you every step of the way, but if you want to ask leading questions, you can do that and get like towards your answer. So the idea that like there's this wiggle room, if you're the like teacher and you're dealing with kids, the kids aren't going to be able to like get away from the kind of like answers you want if you're leading them on. Yeah, Tyndareus says, I just get annoyed by people who have a high ego just because they read a lot of shitty novels. That's fair. Just because you read a lot doesn't make you smart. You have to read good stuff and you have to think about it. Like quality over quantity, you know? And it's like, if you read about stuff and you don't like actually understand, it's like, oh, I've watched a lot of TikTok videos and so now I'm I know a lot of stuff. It's like, really? You learned all that from TikTok? Is that like the authority on whatever it is? It's like, yeah, you did your own research. Where did you do your research? Yeah. Hydrocannabinoid. Objection leading the witness. Yeah, exactly. So again, it's like, yeah, you can read a lot of novels, but you have to read good stuff and you have to think about it. Like, that's the thing. So, it's like, and Tyndareus does read a lot of novels, and I'm sure, some of them are better than others, and you have to be critical about these things. But, like, this is the thing. This is, I think, what Boghossian did right here is unfair. When you know vastly more than someone else, like you're an adult and you're teaching kids who don't know shit about shit, you can lead them on, and it's not like they're going to like avoid your conclusions because they know how. When someone avoids your conclusions, like I avoid someone's conclusions because I know what argument they're presenting, it's because I have a shit ton of background knowledge. And how you doing, Hydrocannabinoid? Good to see you. Unreal says, I've only taught adults to use Socratic method broadly construed, and I tried to get away from that because students know how to identify what you're fishing for. It's not real learning in an important sense. Yeah, so good example. Yeah. Tyndareus says, exactly same with nonfiction books. Some of the most popular ones are absolute nonsense. Yeah. And the paper I just got published is Kahneman from, what's it? I'm blanking on his name. But Kahneman puts out these books, Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow, The White Swan, a bunch of these books about like statistics and thinking. It's like, I disagree with this person. And I have to write like philosophy papers to disagree, but people take this stuff as like, oh, this is canon. No, not all like science is like well interpreted. It's just wrong. Even with nonfiction, some of them are crap. Like, I just disagree with stuff. It may not even be crap, but I still disagree with it. So it's like, yeah. Don't get you started on Malcolm Gladwell. Okay, don't. All right, so but like yeah, this is the problem. I don't think Boghossian is correct in this claim, and this is his main claim of the whole paper is that like, oh yeah, you have this like give and take in Socratic method. It's like, not really, dude. In a Socratic discourse, students and in some cases even the teacher must come to the truth by undergoing an analytic or questioning process. Unreal says Brian's first law: if someone has a TED talk, presume this should be avoided. Black Swan is a concept by Taleb. Yeah, I knew I was getting that wrong too. So we've got Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow, and then we've got a new book too, I think, by I was Taleb's Black Swan. Because you want to know why? The two books, but one by Kahneman and the Black Swan were next to each other on my dad's bookshelf, and so I got them mixed up. And like, yeah, I'm pointing like they were down there, like that way, long time ago. So like I'm remembering seeing them stacked next to each other. So yeah, that's all. Sorry about that. I apologize to Taleb, although I also think Taleb is wrong. Yeah. So many swans. Go watch the Black Swan movie. I like that movie. And Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow is one of your favorite ones. I'm not saying it's necessarily bad. I just disagree with Kahneman. I'm getting more and more disagreeing with him on things. So, and he's generally good, but like again, like that was a whole example. It's not even that it's bad. It's just I think it's wrong. It's like I can't even like be happy with good books because I'm like, no, philosophical problems. Okay. So yeah, so I'm not buying this Boghossian. Yeah, Ira says, when you were a kid who first taught you about philosophy, how did you get into it? I had attempted to do the hipster thing, like read some Nietzsche when I was in high school. I didn't take. I didn't understand anything that was going on. Other people had given me some sort of like pseudo philosophy books because I knew I liked this stuff. None of that really took. Really what happened was I just I hated high school, so I just bullshitted everything I could. So I got really good at bullshitting. I got to college, I realized I could continue to bullshit. I got to philosophy, I was like, some of this is bullshit. Like, you fucking philosophers are bullshitters. And like, this is all crap. And like, they didn't even think they were bullshitting. I was like, this is a shit argument. I made up this argument years ago to bullshit a English paper. And that's what I was like. And then 2 weeks into the first class, I was like, this is stupid. I can do this better than these assholes. And my life's been downhill ever since. Taleb could cut off half the size of his books. That's funny. Juggling says, I mainly read nonfiction and used to disregard fiction, but some of the best fiction can be an exercise on some of the stuff we commonly question. They can be parables that lead to nonfiction reading and vice versa. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. It's harder to do, I think, harder to pull off, but like you can do it really well sometimes. Some of them do. Unreal says, so many of these books written intentionally or otherwise so the author can make money-giving, self-satisfying talks to a big business people. Yeah, and like, am I really angry about like, some academic making a few bucks? Not really. It's just I don't want to have to read the book myself. But like, yeah, like, fine, go sell some books. Like, that's cool. Yeah. Well, yeah, Tindarius is a non-fiction reader. Fair. Per Nogreo, philosopher is a professional bullshittery. Yes. I mean, bullshitting the bullshitters, even more yes. It's like, I know, like, you see what I do here. I sit here and I pick apart these arguments. I pick apart my own arguments. There's a few arguments I find very hard to pick apart. Like, it doesn't work as well sometimes. And that's at the point where you start to realize, okay, it's getting hard, like, to, like, argue with a few things. And or what you think is actually interesting for some reason. Maybe you can pick it apart, but like there's something else going on and you don't want to pick it apart. You're picking it apart doesn't work as well. Then you understand there's something going on in that philosophy that you like. Like why are you picking it apart? Or it hurts, or like you feel bad, or like you just can't do it. But like that's the thing. Yeah, and you read some fantasy for fun. Yeah, exactly. I went on vacation and on the flight down I was reading Harry Dresden books. It was a lot of fun. I read a few of them. It was good times, and it was distracting. It was a good thing for reading on an airplane. Unreal says there's great philosophical fiction. Stanislaw Lem's Solaris, for one example, is your favorite novel. Close second, Neil Stephenson's Anathem. Okay, yeah, see, this is the thing. Like, you might like these things. They might be good. Like, they might do a good thing. For non-fiction books, I just get a summary, but I don't count that as a read, of course. Yeah. You've read Solaris 3 times. Cool. So it's like, this is the thing. There can be philosophically informed books there for whatever reason, you like. That's cool. But I was like, yeah. What I do is I rip apart arguments. Like, one of the problems was people would always like, what do you want to do, Noah? I don't want to do shit. Every story I've ever heard, I can tear that fucking person's life to shreds. The little story of their life and why they think is good. I can rip those stories apart into little itsy bits so it doesn't exist anymore. And it's like, I've had some weird experiences in my life. So the idea that people are going to tell me shit, like, this is how the world is, you should read these books and you'll get like insight into life. I'm like, fuck you, I will tear that shit to little itsy bits and I won't give a fuck at the end, because it doesn't, like, you have to do more to get me to appreciate an argument, like what has value in life. Like, it's not going to happen. So it's like, I'm an oddball, always was, and it's like, these arguments aren't going to work for me. Like, what works for other people doesn't really work for me. I have not watched the One Piece anime. So it's like, I generally tear arguments to shreds, or like, I know what people mean, but like, is it going to mean anything for me? Probably not. So it's like, I've got like weird problems. It's like, you want me to read a book? It's like, fine. But I was like, I'm going to figure out the philosophy quick. It's like, all right. Yeah. It's fun to discuss and pick apart. I know One Piece seems to be getting more and more popular. I keep hearing people mention it, but it's like, yeah. So it's like, what the value in philosophy is like stuff that you think actually is going to go longer. It's going to last longer. Like I just sent a paper out last month for a review, and I argue for a claim there. And the answer is, do I actually think that the argument will hold up? I think the argument might hold up for, a certain number of years, but in the end, some of the criticisms I bring up will win. They will win, but it will take a long time for us to get to that point, for the philosophy to like generate around some of those ideas, for us to actually understand when my theory will start breaking down. And that's kind of how I see everything. Everything is like, it builds and then it dies. It's kind of organic. Yeah, and there's so much nonsense out there. So much nonsense. So it's like, you do what you can. Like, that's a lot of what I think. I do what I can. I'm trying to like, if I can say something that wouldn't have been said in an area before, like, I'll try to, say it if I think it's worth my time. That's about it. But it's like, there's no guarantee of, benefit to me, the world, or anything else. You're just doing what you can. Like, I hope it's good. You find out later sometimes. It's like I said, I just got this paper published. I told someone it was good. He's like, don't say that. You want to say, like, no, it's excellent. I'm like, I don't use that scaling. I actually think it's very good. But, like, basically, it's going to fall down eventually. It's okay. That's everything. It's like, yeah, that's the paper, this one, that just got published. Like, it makes an extremely... What's good about it is I have a really unusual theory. Like, I pull apart truth and probability. Most people can't do this, and that's what's really good about it, is I pull apart something that other people can't do. I make an argument other people can't make, as far as I think. I don't think other people can make it. Yeah. So, yeah, this is the one I just got published. I appreciate the click. You don't have to read it. I'm not asking anyone to read it. If you want to read it, go ahead. But like, you can download it. But like, that's what's good about it. Now, is that any great philosophy? Well, talking about logic and probability, people like that. But, yeah, I mean, I don't make any positive claims. I just pull things apart. So it's not excellent in my view, because I don't put forward a positive thesis. I just, at one point, I kind of hand wave in a direction. But like, that's all I do. And that's why it's not into the excellent range. I think it's very good. But like this, like, what is the grand use of philosophy? Well, in this one, I try to point out something I think other people can't point out at the moment. So there. But like, again, I'm not making any grand claims. And it's like, in other people, like a Boghossian right here, making grand claims about what philosophy and Socratic method can do. It's like, no, this is a little weak little historically weak. I think a little weak in just like actual, as Unreal Brian was saying, if you actually try to do Socratic method, people, if they know what you're doing, they see through it and they can block you. It's like, this doesn't work the way I think Boghossian thinks it works. Yeah, so you know what I'm going to drop this also in my YouTube chat, if I can actually highlight. See if that'll work. There we go. So if anyone's still watching on YouTube, I don't know if I have any YouTube viewers. Probably one or two lurkers. That's what's going on. Probably just got like Ann and Tindarius still lurking from YouTube. But anyway. Okay, what were we saying? Yeah, see, in fact, participants' assent to true proposition emerges, at least in part, because it stands in opposition to the teacher's examples. There is no replication or regurgitation of information or facts, nor is there any behavioral expectation. There are only propositions that yield assent or not. Very strong claims, probably not gonna do it. No, you're not. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. You're Tindario's brother. Appreciate you stopping by, Tindarius. I ever mentioned this? I had a coworker many years ago. His name was Pavel. He was not Russian. His dad was he was Dominican. His dad just didn't want to name his kid Jose or like Rodrigo or whatever. And so he liked the name Pavel. So he was named Pavel. His sister was Pevel, and then he had another sister, Pevel. So Pavel, Pevel, Pevel. So yes. You actually do have a brother. Well, yes, of course. He's in YouTube chat. He said so. Oh, that's unfortunate. Yeah. What's hilarious about that was Pavel was a little gangster. He was a tough guy, looked a little gangster. He liked, acting a little tough too. And he would go to the doctors and they'd mix up his forms. So like he'd get his sister's stuff and they'd be like, when was your last mammogram? He's like, you pulled my sister's file again, didn't you? And they're like, oh, sorry. It's like, yeah. It's like, he was like a tough guy. It's like, not getting a mammogram. I mean, nowadays, I guess you could have like a trans surgery, but he was not having that. Yeah, okay. It is through the elenchus that true or false propositions can be known. Again, this is a massive epistemological claim. This is not established by this paper or even by Socrates or Plato for that matter. Plato actually would not have said that. You have say you have like access to the world of forms or something. That's how you know things. But anyway, behaviorism has no elenchic process, but unlike constructivism, this is not because behaviorism and Socratic pedagogy have different epistemological or ontological commitments. Rather, behaviorism does not see the contributions of the learner as contributing to the corpus of knowledge. Students do not have privileged knowledge regarding observable stimuli, and the responses that follow. In fact, a rigorous experimental design process needs to be in place for lawful relationships of observable phenomena can be discovered. I'm sorry, I think I misread that sentence, but you get the idea. You're a bureaucrat, you have access to the world of forms. There you go. Behaviorism's strict idea of what constitutes valid knowledge and expectant behavior leaves virtually no space for dialectical interplay between students and teachers. Yeah, I mean, again, if you had linguistic behaviorism in here, where the things you are saying count as behaviors on a very, fine level, then you could do it, but that gets much more difficult for interpreting words as specific behaviors, and sentences as behaviors. However, like behaviorism, Socratic pedagogy has an objectivist presupposition that knowledge should represent a real world that is thought of as existing separate and independent of the knower, and this knowledge should be considered true only if it correctly reflects that independent world. As such, like the behaviorist, the Socratic teacher recognizes that there are true or false propositions. But unlike the behaviorist model, true or falsity is not determined by the teacher or by the accepted canon of knowledge, or by observed behaviors, or even by the broader theoretical constraints of the paradigm, but by the dialectical process, by the elenchus. Yeah, so if you think this is an epistemology, that you find knowledge by talking in a certain way, then everyone would just talk that way to get knowledge. But that's not what happens. But that's just what's getting claimed here, is that there is a special privileged way to talk and discuss with the world, and that gets us more knowledge. Very odd theory here by Boghossian, but all right. A behaviorist would be likely to view the Socratic method as a type of stimulus. A crude analogy would be that this Socratic teacher is like a dog trainer trying to bring students where she wants them to go. The Socratic practitioner, however, views student acknowledgement of true propositions as the result of a dynamic process in which students are active and willing participants in their own learning. This is, ironically, one of the few similarities Socratic pedagogy between Socratic pedagogy and Constructivism. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. If you have to discuss in interrelated things, then you are constructing something, and the elenchus is more like a construction than a behavior sort of out in the world just learn it. The elenchus is a construction, and so that will have overlap with constructivism, which I guess we'll discuss right now. Can a Socratic teacher be a constructivist? And this is a quote. The displacement of the idea that facts and evidence matter by the idea that everything boils down to a subjective interests and perspectives is, second only to American political campaigns, the most prominent and pernicious manifestation of anti-intellectualism in our time. I guess that's from Larry Loudon in 1990. And then we got a quote from Hine. Does it actually make any difference in our everyday work whether deep down we consider knowledge to be about some real world independent of us, or whether we consider knowledge to be of our own making? The answer is yes, it does make a difference. In our profession, our epistemological views dictate our pedagogic views. Yeah, I mean, what does it actually amount to? I mean, if you're really just going to go by results, then sometimes it's not going to work as well. If what you're talking about doesn't overlap with what someone else thinks. So it does matter in pedagogy. Like if your truth does not correlate with what their truth is. Okay. So to answer the question, can a Socratic teacher be a constructivist? The short answer is no. A Socratic teacher cannot be a constructivist. Even though there are elements of constructivism within Socratic pedagogy, constructivist learning theory is at base antithetical to Socratic practice. Yeah, because again, Socratic practice presupposes a Platonic metaphysics, at least in the way that's been described here. The epistemological and ontological assumptions going into a Socratic discourse are not just completely different, but at odds with constructivist learning theory. The presupposition of the Socratic method is that the truth exists independent of one's beliefs, even though one may not be able to find the truth of the matter in a particular Socratic session. Progress towards reaching a final understanding has taken place. See, now he's quoting the Philosophical Encyclopedia of Philosophy. Really? Really? I mean, you can do that, but that's a little weird, for a research paper. I quote the SEP, but for general factoid things, but a substantive claim of what happens in Socratic philosophy is I'm not sure that's a great thing to do. Okay, an imperfect example is that one cannot inquire into how an airplane flies unless one accepts the fact that airplanes exist. Similarly, there are underlying assumptions of every Socratic discourse: that the world exists independently of the knower, that there is a truth of the matter that can be discovered, that one can come to know the truth through discourse, that there are fair and impartial ways of adjudicating competing claims, that some propositions are false, and that there is such a thing as a final understanding. These assumptions are at odds with constructivism. I mean, that's all fair. For constructivists, helping students arrive at the truth is impossible, and therefore it cannot be the purpose of education. Constructivist learning theory is about the process of learning and helping people discover their truths. Unreal Brian says that that's wrong. We can ask how unicorns prance and have intelligent conversation about it. Yet, see, again, this is sort of the Boghossian view of the world. I'm not sure that any of this should be taken as, fact, really. So I'm not entirely sure. Maybe he could carve out some space for talking about, fictional things like unicorns and how we can discuss them, but, yeah, I'm not sure. He definitely did not say that here, though. And let me know if, that makes sense. I'm starting to lose my mind again. Okay, for constructivists, helping students arrive at the truth is impossible and therefore cannot be the purpose of education. Constructivist learning theory is about the process of learning and help people discover their truth. The truth element of the Socratic method is an anathema to most varieties of constructivism, particularly those committed to the stronger thesis that whatever students construct as knowledge then becomes de facto true. An extreme example of this would be if I think that 7 plus 5 is 13, then my thinking so is both necessary and sufficient justification for it being the case. Again, this is because of radical subjectivity or the true for nature embodied in the constructivist learning paradigm. Yeah, I mean, I just don't understand how people could start going over things that are by definition certain ways and saying that's not true, because I mean you can then go and say, well, we're going to go back and say, well, we're going to have a different math. And people do this. They have like different maths where you can have 7 plus 5 not equal 13, but like that's probably not what's happening when you're trying to teach kids addition. So it's just like, yeah, like how is that true for you? Like how? And it's like, oh, it just is. Like 1 apple plus 2 apples is 5 apples. It's like, really? How? Like, tell me. Like, why would anyone, if it's true for you, fine, but why would anyone want to use a math like that? Now, people, of course, have different maths. They do. But, like, why would anyone else want to do it? So, you can have that sort of thing, but it's strange. Unreal says he wants to create a straw man of constructivism and then somehow beat up with the straw man of Socratic method. That's fair. I mean, that is the general structure of this paper, is to, straw man the 2 other positions and then say, oh, I've got this much more reasonable thing in between. But again, like I said, it's a very particular view that he has, a idiosyncratic view of what it is. And it's like, is that really worth anything? I'm not sure. Like, I don't, like, maybe, but like, again, we don't even think that like his Socratic method can do what he wants it to do. All right. The purpose of the Socratic method is to give participants a way to arrive at the truth, and the Socratic teacher attempts to guide students and even herself to the truth. In the Socratic method, in the Socratic model, there is no true for me and not true for you. There are propositions that have truth values. Constructivism, however, asserts that the purpose of an education is to let students discover their own truth, that is, what is true for them. These 2 notions are fundamentally incompatible. Propositions are either true or false, or they are true for me and not true for you. One's beliefs about the truth will drive one's pedagogy. Yeah. I mean, I feel like the constructivists are trying to get kids to like understand what it is to learn something, and then they kind of trust that people aren't so different. So, like the truth for me will be the truth for you, even though it's like not necessary for them to foist it on people. I feel like by them not foisting on it, they know that people are kind of similar and they're going to arrive at similar conclusions. And so maybe it's more, we should not be forcing it on people because it's better for them to figure it out on their own. And it's more pedagogy than like metaphysics. I mean, I suspect that's what's going on. I don't know. But the idea that like they're thinking, oh yeah, 7 plus 5 is 13 when it's not. It's like, that's weird. To accomplish its ultimate goal, the Socratic method has a built-in corrective mechanism, the elenchus, that makes it unlikely that false propositions will endure the entire discourse. I mean, again, this is like strange. Like, if you have an idiot teacher, they're just going to be forcing the idiot things on the students. So it's just like, I'm not sure that it will actually force the false propositions out. Like, really? It makes it unlikely that it won't be there. Just imagine you have a moron for a teacher that's teaching kids something like really stupid. Like, the kids aren't going to be able to fight back. Not going to happen. Okay. However, if knowledge is constructed and truth is located, as the Constructivists believe that it is, then the Socratic method cannot achieve its epistemological ambitions, and false propositions can neither be weeded out nor identified. If utterances like, oh, it's true for me in my reality, were acceptable, then there could be no elentic process. This would lead to an epistemological obituary because any type of dialectical interchange would be prevented by relativist claims. As such, a constructivist could not authentically practice the Socratic method. Yeah. Garbage out, garbage in the classroom. That's fair, yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm thinking. It's like, again, this is really taking a very idiosyncratic view on things, and he's assuming no bad actors in the classroom. It's like, that's just not true. All right, conclusion. Finish it up, this last paragraph. Both behaviorism and constructivism are incompatible with Socratic practice. I mean, that might be true, but like that has nothing to do with anything else he's saying. Each learning thinker has its elements that are antithetical to Socratic pedagogy. Behaviorism rejects the dialectical process and does not actively involve the learner, and constructivism has a radically different epistemology and metaphysic. In some ways, because Socratic pedagogy shares elements of each, it is a middle ground between both. See appendix. What's up, Adam and Rapture? You've been listening for the past 15 minutes. Cool. However, it would be a mistake to say that these similarities are sufficient to enable a Socratic teacher to be a constructivist or a behaviorist. Socratic pedagogy occupies a unique category and provides the oldest learning process known, education through directed discourse. The Socratic method presupposes that there is a truth, we just need cooperation and dialogue to find it. This is so weird. just by talking, we can figure out the truth. I mean, do you really think that just by talking, we would have figured out that like the earth goes around the sun, not the sun around the earth? It took a huge amount of astronomy to do this. Huge amounts of astronomy, work by lots of people, all sorts of stuff. And so it's just like this sentence is obviously false. Just obviously false. And it's like, this is like how you end your paper. It's like, but we had to do all this other work. Like, what happened to quantum physics? You think we were just discussing that and they were like, oh yeah, the uncertainty principle. No. Just no. But all right, whatever. All right, let's rate this paper. I'm not sure I got a huge amount of stuff to talk about. I mean, it just seems like a lot of this stuff was how Boghossian wants the world to be, and not really what Socratic dialogue is, or for that matter, behaviorism or constructivism. A lot of stuff here. Unreal says, it seems like you could make a claim that Plato, in the mouth of Socrates, thought that everything that really mattered would think that way, which is wrong, of course. Yeah, see, that's the sort of thing. It's Plato, in the mouth of Socrates, in the mouth of Boghossian, thinks like everything worth discussing can be figured out this way. That's just weird, though. It really seems strange that you can figure out, like, you think you're going to figure out everything of value just by talking stuff through, and that there's no other sort of, like, way of understanding this. Unreal says, I wish this would have been done well, but it's terrible from the perspective of someone like you who actually knows something about philosophy of education. Yeah, so this is the thing. Everyone who in chat now, you can see the review screen is up. During the review screen being up, I record the emotes you use, these specifically, also the global vote yay and vote nay. So if you're Adam and Rapture who've been listening, you want to vote, that's cool. If you just got here and want to vote, that's cool too. But like, you know, try to say what you think. So Unreal Brian, thank you for the vote. So Braindance for fun ideas. Was this a fun paper? Did you think it had good ideas in it? And then the global nay, because it was not worth it. So I think this is a not grapes one. This made some big claims that just sort of like shriveled up in the end. They just didn't go anywhere. Or no, is this grapes or is this all style no substance? Okay, no, he stuck to his guns. This isn't grapes. This is the turd. It was all like him making shit up, but it was all shit underneath. Yeah, it's a shit underneath. That's right. I agree with it being the golden turd. So we're gonna get this 2 golden turds, which is too bad, and a vote nay. I can't spell. Vote nay. So that's what we're gonna get from this. Do we have anything else we want to say? That's a double flush. Yeah, exactly. And you know, this isn't a terrible Nog Oro. We're gonna give this a Nog Oro too, because it's got the old. It's trying to bring back the old ideas. I don't hate that. Like, I think, like you were saying, it would have been great if it was done well. Like, we had some old theory of like teaching brought back, and to like really criticize and give an alternative to modern contemporary ways of doing pedagogy. That would have been really cool. So this is attempting to pull back some like ancient ideas. That's a great strategy to pull in something. But yeah, it was better memory. You know, he doesn't like. Not the worst paper. It's just not that good is the issue. Like, when you start poking at this stuff, it's not good. This is really a golden turd. It looks sort of better from a distance, but when you get up close, like the old joke, it's a Picasso. From a distance, or was that a Monet? Yeah, it was a Monet. From a distance, it looks fine. When you get up close, it's all fucked up. That's what this is. Like, in some sense, if you just like, from the grand scheme of things, you're taking a Socratic viewpoint and using it to contrast contemporary teaching theory. That's cool. Just the execution here was poor and sort of idiosyncratic and weird at times. Like, things like I said, that last sentence is just plainly false, and you can kind of make it better by saying, well, anything worth knowing, but then it turns into anything worth Boghossian thinks worth knowing, and it's just sort of, that's not really how it's gonna work for anyone else. So Unreal says he wandered into a topic that he hadn't read enough about or to talk about. Yeah, it's a lot of philosophy. I'm not like I've done this myself a bunch of times. This is what I get like on some of my reviewer reports. Not always true, but they say you didn't read enough about this. You don't understand this enough. Sometimes you understand enough, sometimes you don't. It's like, I'm not going to hate on him enough for screwing this up, but like, hey, doesn't matter. He got published. So, yeah. So anyone else? We got a bunch of people in here in chat. Please feel free to use the emotes. Just copy and paste them if you can. If not, it's cool too, but I'll leave the discussion up a bit. But yeah, so this was all, for me, all style, no substance. Trying for the deep ancient ideas. But yeah, and a vote nay. So